The morning I discovered my wife was sleeping with another man, I'd gone back home for a thermos. That's the thing about life-altering moments. They never announce themselves. No dramatic music, no warning signs you can point to later and say, "There, that's when I should have known." Just a forgotten thermos of coffee sitting on the kitchen counter, and me pulling a U-turn 3 blocks from the shipyard because I couldn't face an 8-hour shift of welding without my caffeine. My name is Ray Coleman. I'm 39 years old, a union welder at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, and until that Thursday morning in March, I thought I had a pretty decent life. A house in a blue-collar neighborhood south of Seattle. A 10-year-old son named Tyler who thought his dad hung the moon. And a wife named Lena who worked from home as a remote insurance adjuster, handling workers' compensation claims from our spare bedroom. Turns out I was wrong about one of those things. It was 7:22 a.m. when I turned onto Maple Street and saw Lena's silver Honda Accord tucked behind Mrs. Kendrick's overgrown hedge, 3 houses down from ours. The neighbor was in Arizona visiting her grandkids, had been for 2 weeks. So why was my wife's car hidden in her driveway like she was trying to avoid being seen? I pulled past our house without stopping, parked around the corner, sat there with my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Maybe there's an explanation, I told myself. Maybe she ran an errand. Maybe the car wouldn't start and she got a ride with someone. But I'd kissed her goodbye 40 minutes earlier. Watched her shuffle toward her home office in her bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, already complaining about a stack of claims she needed to process before lunch. So why was her car hidden outside? I pulled out my phone. 6 months ago, I'd installed a dash cam in Lena's Honda. A safety device, I'd called it, after a string of carjackings made the local news. What I hadn't told her was that the camera had a remote viewing feature. I could check the footage from anywhere, anytime, through an app on my phone. At the time, I'd felt guilty about it. Paranoid, even. Lena had laughed when I suggested the camera, told me I worried too much, and let me install it without argument. I'd never actually used the remote feature. Never had a reason to. Until now. My thumb hovered over the app icon. Part of me wanted to put the phone down, drive to work, and pretend I'd never seen the car. Pretend everything was fine. Keep living in the comfortable lie I'd apparently built my marriage on. But I've never been good at pretending. I opened the app and pulled up that morning's footage. The video started at 6:45 a.m., right after I'd left for work. Lena walked out of the house, not in her bathrobe anymore, but in the tight jeans and low-cut blouse she usually saved for date nights. She got in the car, checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, and drove exactly 3 houses down before pulling into Mrs. Kendrick's driveway. Then she walked back to our house and went inside through the back door. I watched her do this 3 more times over the next several weeks of stored footage. Same routine, same hidden car, same outfit change. Always on days when I left early for the shipyard. My hands were shaking when I switched to the audio enhancement feature. The dash cam picked up sound through a wireless microphone I'd mounted on the dashboard, another safety feature I'd insisted on. I scrolled to a recording from 2 days earlier and cranked up the volume. Lena's voice filled my truck cab. "Told you, the documentation has to look perfect. Ray's union uses the same form for all injury reports, and if the dates don't match the incident timeline, the adjuster will flag it immediately." A man's voice responded. Deeper, confident. "I've got the photos ready. The bruising looks real enough?" "It's fine. I've pushed through worse. Just make sure you remember the story. You slipped on hydraulic fluid near the welding station. Your supervisor was negligent about cleanup. That's worth at least $80,000 in a settlement. And when do I get to see you again? Lena laughed, a low, throaty sound I hadn't heard from her in years. Victor, you're insatiable. Give me 2 hours to process the paperwork and then come over. Ray won't be home until 6. I stopped the playback. Victor. The name hit me like a physical blow. Not just because my wife was clearly sleeping with this man in our bed, in our home, while I worked double shifts to pay our mortgage, but because I'd heard that name before. Victor Hale. He'd come up in conversation maybe 8 months ago. Lena had mentioned a difficult client with a complicated workers' comp claim. She'd been working late on his case, she said. Lots of phone calls, lots of paperwork. I'd believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife. Now I was listening to her coach him through what sounded an awful lot like insurance fraud. I sat in my truck for another 20 minutes, pulling up more footage, more audio. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a bored housewife looking for excitement. This was a criminal operation, and my wife was running it. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I drove to a parking lot behind a grocery store and spent 4 hours going through every piece of footage on that dash cam. Every recorded conversation, every route Lena had taken over the past 6 months that I'd been too trusting, too stupid, to check. The dash cam had captured it all. Meetings with Victor at coffee shops and hotel parking lots. Phone calls where Lena walked him through fabricated injury claims, complete with fake witnesses and doctored medical reports. Conversations about money, large sums deposited into accounts I'd never heard of. But the recording that made my blood turn cold came from 3 weeks earlier. The shipyard cases are the most profitable, Lena was saying. Ray's union has excellent coverage, and the claims adjusters are overworked. They rubber stamp anything that looks legitimate. And your husband doesn't suspect anything? Ray? She laughed. He's a welder, Victor. He comes home exhausted, eats dinner, watches TV, and falls asleep on the couch. He doesn't have the imagination to suspect anything. Sounds boring. You have no idea, but his union connections are useful. I've been photographing his ID cards, his safety certifications, the incident report forms he brings home sometimes. Everything we need to make our claims look authentic. I had to stop the playback and get out of the truck. I leaned against the hood, hands on my knees, trying to breathe through the rage that was threatening to consume me. She'd been using me. Not just cheating on me, using my job, my union, my brothers at the shipyard to steal money from a system designed to protect injured workers. I thought about Pete Kowalski, who'd lost 3 fingers to a faulty grinding wheel last year and spent 4 months fighting to get his disability payments approved. I thought about Marcus Webb, who'd herniated 2 discs and couldn't afford the surgery his doctors recommended because his claim kept getting delayed for review. Were those delays connected to Lena? Had legitimate claims been pushed aside to make room for fake ones? The thought made me physically sick. I got back in the truck and kept watching. By 2 p.m., I had a rough picture of the operation. Victor Hale wasn't an injured worker at all. He was a recruiter, finding people willing to file fake claims in exchange for a cut of the settlement money. Lena handled the paperwork, using her position as an adjuster to shepherd the claims through the system and avoid the red flags that would trigger an investigation. The scope was bigger than I'd imagined. Multiple states, dozens of fake claims, hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from workers' compensation funds. And it had been going on for at least 18 months. Right under my nose. At 3:30 p.m., I drove home. Lena's car was back in our driveway, no longer hidden. When I walked through the front door, she was sitting at the kitchen table in her bathrobe again, laptop open, looking every inch the dedicated remote worker. "Ray?" She looked up, surprised. "What are you doing home? Is everything okay?" I stared at her. This woman I'd married 11 years ago, the mother of my son, the person I'd trusted with every part of my life. "Victor left?" I asked. The color drained from her face. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the mask slip, saw the calculation happening behind her eyes as she weighed her options. Then she forced a smile. "What are you talking about? I've been working all day." "Don't." I pulled out my phone and played the audio from that morning's dash cam. Lena's voice filled the kitchen, talking about fake injury claims and $80,000 settlements and how her husband was too stupid to suspect anything. Lena sat perfectly still while the recording played. When it ended, she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not shame, defiance. "How long have you been spying on me?" "That's your response? I catch you running an insurance fraud operation with your boyfriend, and you want to talk about the dash cam?" "Victor isn't my boyfriend. He's a business associate." "A business associate you're sleeping with, in our bed, while our son is at school." She flinched at that, the first crack in her armor. "Ray, you don't understand what's happening here. This is more complicated than you think." "Then explain it to me. Explain how my wife became a criminal." Lena stood up, paced to the window, kept her back to me when she spoke. "Do you know how much money passes through the workers' comp system every year?" "Billions, Ray. Billions of dollars, and half of it goes to lawyers and bureaucrats and administrators who never did an honest day's work in their lives. I'm just redirecting some of that money to people who actually need it. People like Victor Hale? He's never worked on a shipyard in his life. He's never been injured. He's a con artist, and you're helping him steal from actual injured workers." "That's not..." "I have 18 months of footage, Lena. I have recordings of you coaching him through fake claims. I have evidence of you photographing my union credentials. I have everything." She turned around. Her eyes were wet now, but I couldn't tell if the tears were real or another performance. "What are you going to do?" Before I could answer, the back door opened. Victor Hale walked into my kitchen like he owned the place. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of artificial tan and expensive haircut that screamed con artist to anyone paying attention. He was holding a bottle of wine and wearing a smile that died the moment he saw me. "Oh," he said, "you're home early." I covered the distance between us in 3 steps. Had him by the collar of his $200 shirt before he could react. "Get out of my house." "Ray, wait," Lena started. "Get out." Victor tried to twist away, but I've spent 20 years doing manual labor. My grip strength isn't something you develop at a gym. I walked him backward through the kitchen, through the living room, and out the front door. Threw him hard enough that he stumbled off the porch and landed on his tailbone in my front yard. "If I see you near my family again," I said, "I'll break every bone in your body." He scrambled to his feet, brushing grass off his expensive slacks. "You're making a mistake, Coleman. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A con man who targets married women so he can steal from their husbands' unions. Get in your car and drive away, or I'm calling the cops right now and letting them sort it out." Victor's smile came back. Colder this time. "Call them. By the time they get here, Lena will have told them you've been abusing her for years. That's why she came to me for help. That's why she's been acting strange. We've got documentation, Ray. Medical reports. Photos of bruises. Everything we'd need to make your life very, very difficult. He straightened his collar. Think about that before you do anything stupid. He got in his Mercedes and drove away. When I turned around, Lena was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. He's right, you know, she said quietly. If you try to turn me in, I'll bury you. I've been planning for this possibility for months. The documentation I've assembled will make you look like a monster. You'd do that? To the father of your child? I'd do whatever it takes to survive. You should understand that, Ray. You work with men who do whatever it takes every single day. She went back inside and closed the door. I stood on my own porch, in the yard I'd mowed every Saturday for 8 years, and realized I didn't know my wife at all. I didn't sleep that night, couldn't even close my eyes. Instead, I sat in my truck in the driveway, going through every piece of evidence I had, organizing it into folders, making backup copies to a cloud drive Victor and Lena didn't know about. At 5 a.m., I started making lists. The footage I'd collected was damning, but it wasn't enough. Not if Lena really had assembled a counter-narrative that painted me as an abuser. Her threat wasn't idle. I'd seen enough custody battles go sideways at the Union Hall to know that accusations, even false ones, had a way of sticking. I needed more. I needed to understand exactly how big this operation was, who else was involved, and how to bring it down without destroying myself in the process. By 6 a.m., I had a plan. I went inside. Lena was already awake, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, staring at me with wary eyes. We need to talk, I said. I thought we did that yesterday. That wasn't talking. That was me losing my temper. This is different. I sat down across from her. I've been up all night thinking about this, and I've realized something. You're right. I don't fully understand what's happening here. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I mean, the footage I have shows pieces of something bigger. Victor, the fake claims, your role in all of it. But I'm missing context. I'm missing the why. I kept my voice steady. Reasonable. Help me understand, Lena. Help me understand how we got here. She studied me for a long moment, looking for the trap. You're not going to turn me in? I don't know what I'm going to do. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out what my wife has been doing for the past 1.5 years. Lena sipped her coffee. Set the mug down carefully. It started small, she said finally. 2 years ago, I processed a claim that was obviously fraudulent. Some guy who'd never worked a day of construction in his life, claiming he'd fallen off a scaffold. His paperwork was garbage, but my supervisor pushed it through anyway because the claimant's lawyer was threatening to make noise about processing delays. So you learned the system could be gamed. I learned the system was already being gamed. By everyone. Lawyers who took 30% of every settlement. Medical providers who billed for treatments that never happened. Employers who underreported injuries to keep their premiums low. I was just joining the party. And Victor? Her jaw tightened. Victor found me. He has a talent for identifying people who are useful to him. He offered me a partnership. I handle the claims side, he handles recruitment. We split the proceeds 50-50. How much? Over 18 months? A little over $300,000. I felt like I'd been punched. $300,000. While I'd been working double shifts, breathing welding fumes, coming home with burns on my arms and a permanent ache in my lower back. Where's the money? Offshore accounts. Victor handles the financial side. I don't ask questions. So you have nothing to show for this? Nothing physical? I have enough to disappear if I need to. That's the point. I leaned back in my chair, processed what she'd told me. The claims you've processed, I said slowly. Some of them target my shipyard, my union. Victor prefers union targets, better coverage, less scrutiny. Do you have any idea what that means? Those funds aren't infinite, Lena. When fake claims get paid out, real workers suffer. Men I've known for 20 years get their disability checks delayed or denied because the system is overwhelmed with fraudulent paperwork. That's not my problem. It's exactly your problem. You made it your problem the moment you started stealing from them. Her eyes went flat. Don't lecture me, Ray. You work for a system that chews men up and spits them out. Half your union brothers are walking around with permanent injuries they'll never get fully compensated for. I'm not the villain here. You're not Robin Hood either. She stood up abruptly. This conversation is over. You wanted to understand, and now you do. What happens next is up to you, but remember what I told you yesterday. If you come after me, I'll make sure you go down too. She walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard the bedroom door slam. I sat at the table for another hour, thinking. Then I called in sick to work and drove to the union hall. Mason Torres was exactly where I expected to find him, in the cramped safety office behind the main meeting room, surrounded by stacks of incident reports and OSHA compliance forms. He'd been the union's safety inspector for 15 years, and in that time, he'd developed a reputation for two things: an encyclopedic knowledge of workplace regulations and an absolute refusal to be intimidated by management. He looked up when I knocked on the doorframe. Ray? Thought you were on the morning shift? Called in sick. You look like you could use a hospital. What's going on? I closed the door behind me, sat down in the folding chair across from his cluttered desk. I need your help with something, Mason. But before I explain, I need you to promise me this stays between us. He leaned back, studying my face. That depends on what you're about to tell me. Fair enough. I took a breath. I think there's a fraud ring targeting our workers' comp fund, a big one. Multiple states, multiple claims, going back at least 18 months. Mason's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. What makes you think that? Because my wife is running it. For the next hour, I laid everything out. The dash cam footage, the audio recordings, Lena's confession, Victor Hale and his recruitment operation, the scope of what they'd built while I was too blind to notice. Mason listened without interrupting. When I finished, he pulled a bottle of whiskey from his desk drawer and poured 2 glasses. I've been noticing patterns, he said quietly. Claims that don't quite add up. Injury reports that describe scenarios that don't match the physics of what actually happened. I've flagged maybe a dozen over the past year, but the claims got approved anyway. A dozen? That I noticed. Could be more. He pushed one of the glasses toward me. The thing about fraud at this level, Ray, it's designed to look legitimate. Individual claims that might raise eyebrows, but nothing that screams, investigate me, when you look at each one in isolation. Can you help me build a case? Depends. What are you trying to accomplish? I want to bring them down. All of them. Victor, the people he's recruited, whoever else is involved. And yes, that includes Lena. Mason whistled low. That's a big ask. We're talking federal crime here. Interstate fraud, probably identity theft, maybe RICO violations. This isn't something you take to the local cops. I know. That's why I came to you. He drank his whiskey, set the glass down. I know some people, he said finally. Department of Labor investigators. FBI contacts who handle white-collar crime. If what you're describing is real, and those recordings suggest it is, this could be exactly the kind of case they're looking for. What do you need from me? Everything. Every piece of footage, every recording, every document you can get your hands on. We need to map the network. Every fake claimant, every compromised adjuster, every medical provider who's issuing bogus reports. Lena mentioned a clinic. She didn't name it, but from context, it sounds like there's a doctor somewhere generating fake medical documentation. Mason nodded slowly. That tracks. Fraud at this scale needs medical cover. Someone to create paper trails that back up the injury claims. He pulled out a notepad and started writing. Here's what I need you to do. Go back home. Act normal. Don't let Lena know you're building a case against her. She already suspects something. Then unsuspect her. Apologize for yesterday. Tell her you overreacted. Buy yourself time while I reach out to my contacts. And if she doesn't buy it, then we move faster. But Ray, he looked at me hard. This is going to get worse before it gets better. You understand that, right? If we do this, your marriage is over. Your son's life is going to be turned upside down. Everything you've built is going to burn. It's already burning, Mason. I'm just deciding whether to let it take me down too. He nodded. Then let's get to work. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I went home that night and apologized to Lena. Told her I'd been shocked, angry, not thinking clearly. Said I needed time to process everything, but I wasn't going to do anything rash. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she accepted the truce, probably because she needed time too. Time to figure out how to protect herself if everything went sideways. We moved around each other like strangers. Ate meals in silence. Slept in the same bed without touching. Tyler noticed something was wrong, but when he asked, we both lied and told him everything was fine. That was the worst part. Lying to my son. During the days, I worked my shifts at the shipyard. At night, I met with Mason and a growing team of investigators who'd taken an interest in our case. Special Agent Rivera from the FBI was a compact woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor and a talent for cutting through complicated financial records. She'd spent 15 years investigating white-collar crime, and when she reviewed my evidence, her eyes lit up in a way that told me we'd found the right person. This is good, she said during our third meeting, spreading printed transcripts of Lena's recordings across the conference table. This is really good. Your wife made a critical mistake. She talked openly in a location where she thought she had privacy. That gives us probable cause to dig deeper. How much deeper? Phone records, financial transactions, medical billing data. If there's a clinic generating fake reports, we'll find it. She looked up at me. But I need to know you're committed to this, Mr. Coleman. Once we start pulling these threads, there's no going back. I'm committed. Even knowing your wife will likely face federal charges? Especially knowing that. She nodded. Then let's talk about what happens next. Over the following week, the investigation expanded rapidly. Rivera's team subpoenaed phone records that confirmed regular contact between Lena, Victor, and a third party, a woman named Dr. Ashley Bennett, who operated a small occupational health clinic in Tacoma. When I heard that name, something clicked. Lena mentioned her once, I told Rivera. About 6 months ago, said she'd found a cooperative medical provider who understood how the system worked. Bennett's been on our radar for a while, Rivera admitted. She's had an unusual number of workers' comp patients over the past 2 years, all with similar injuries, all generating similar documentation. We couldn't prove anything, but now, she smiled thinly. Now we can. The breakthrough came 10 days after my initial meeting with Mason. Rivera's team had been monitoring Victor's phone, and they intercepted a call that blew the case wide open. He's panicking, Rivera told me during an emergency meeting at the federal building. Apparently, one of his recruited claimants got cold feet and threatened to go to the police. Victor's trying to arrange a meeting to handle the situation. Handle it how? That's what we need to find out. We're setting up surveillance on the meet location. If Victor says anything incriminating, and based on his pattern he will, we'll have enough to move. When? 3 days. The meeting is scheduled for Friday afternoon at Dr. Bennett's clinic. I want to be there. Rivera shook her head. Absolutely not. You're a civilian, and you're too personally involved. If something goes wrong, my wife is part of this, Agent Rivera. My son's mother. I need to see it through. She studied me for a long moment. You can observe, she said finally. From a safe distance, in a surveillance vehicle. But you stay in the van. You don't approach anyone. You don't say a word. Understood? Understood. The Friday of the operation was the longest day of my life. I told Lena I had a training seminar at the Union Hall. She barely looked up from her laptop when I left. Our Cold War had settled into a routine of mutual avoidance that almost felt normal. Tyler hugged me at the door. Love you, Dad. Love you too, buddy. I'll be home for dinner. I drove to the staging location, an empty parking lot 3 blocks from Dr. Bennett's clinic, and climbed into the back of an unmarked FBI van. Mason was already there, along with Rivera and 2 other agents monitoring a bank of screens. We've got eyes inside the clinic, Rivera explained, pointing to one of the monitors. Hidden camera in the waiting room, audio pickup in Bennett's office. If Victor says anything useful, we'll have it recorded. And Lena? She's at your house. We have a team watching her. If she tries to run, we'll know. The waiting was excruciating. For 2 hours, nothing happened. Victor arrived at 2:15 p.m., parked his Mercedes in the clinic lot, and went inside. Dr. Bennett greeted him like an old friend, which I supposed she was. They disappeared into her office. The audio feed crackled to life. Getting nervous, Victor. This isn't what I signed up for. Nobody's getting cold feet, Ashley. I'm handling it. Handling it how? Because if Thomas goes to the police, he won't. I've got leverage on him. Same leverage I've got on everyone. Rivera leaned forward. There. He just admitted to blackmail. That's additional charges. The conversation continued. Victor laid out the scope of the operation. 53 fake claims across 3 states, $2.8 million in fraudulent payouts, and a network of recruiters, medical providers, and compromised adjusters that had taken 3 years to build. And then he said something that made my blood freeze. The union guys are the best targets. Their wives are lonely, their benefits are excellent, and they're too exhausted from physical labor to notice what's happening under their own roofs. Lena Coleman was my best find. Gave us direct access to one of the biggest shipyards on the West Coast. Mason's hand landed on my shoulder, steadying. Easy, Ray. We need him to keep talking. Victor kept talking. He described how he'd targeted Lena, identified her frustrations with her job, her marriage, her life. cultivated the relationship over months until she was willing to do anything he asked. "She's smart," he said, almost admiringly. "Smartest one I've ever worked with. But she's also compromised. If this thing falls apart, I've got enough on her to guarantee she goes down alone." "What about the rest of us?" "You're protected, Ashley. We all are, as long as everyone keeps their mouths shut and their heads down." Dr. Bennett didn't look reassured. "And if Coleman's husband figures out what's happening, he's already suspicious." Lena said he found her dashcam footage. "Ray Coleman is a welder, not a detective. He'll bluster and threaten, but he doesn't have the resources to build a real case. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll have moved everything offshore." Rivera turned to me. "We've got enough. I'm calling it." She spoke into her radio. "All units, move in. Execute arrest warrants." On the monitors, I watched federal agents pour into the clinic from every entrance. Victor's face went white when he saw the badges. Dr. Bennett tried to run for a back door and was tackled by 2 agents before she made it 5 steps. In the surveillance van, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "It's over?" Mason asked. "Not quite," Rivera said. "We still need to pick up Mrs. Coleman." They arrested Lena at 3:47 p.m. I wasn't there. Rivera had insisted I stay away, said it would be better for everyone, especially Tyler, if I wasn't present when the agents arrived. But I watched the feed from the surveillance team, saw my wife's face when she opened the front door and found 4 FBI agents on our porch. She didn't run, didn't cry, just nodded once like she'd been expecting this and asked if she could call a lawyer. Tyler was still at school. I'd arranged for him to stay at aftercare until I could pick him up. Rivera had agreed to time the arrest to minimize trauma to my son. Small mercies. By 6 p.m., Victor Hale, Dr. Ashley Bennett, and Lena Coleman were all in federal custody. The following morning, arrest warrants were executed across Washington, Oregon, and California, sweeping up 15 additional conspirators, recruiters, fake claimants, and a handful of other medical providers who'd been generating fraudulent documentation. The final tally was staggering. 53 fake claims, $2.8 million stolen from workers' compensation funds, thousands of legitimate injured workers whose claims had been delayed or denied while fraudsters collected checks. It was, according to the Department of Labor, one of the largest workers' comp fraud rings ever dismantled on the West Coast. And my wife had been at the center of it. The next 3 months were a blur of depositions, court appearances, and custody hearings. Victor Hale went to trial first. He tried to cut a deal, offered to testify against everyone else in exchange for reduced charges, but the prosecutors weren't interested. They had recordings, financial records, and a paper trail so damning that his own lawyer barely mounted a defense. He got 12 years in federal prison. Eligible for parole in 8. Dr. Ashley Bennett cooperated from the start. Handed over records, named names, did everything she could to reduce her exposure. It worked, sort of. She got 8 years, with credit for cooperation. Lena's case was more complicated. Her lawyer argued that she'd been manipulated by Victor, coerced into participating in a scheme she didn't fully understand. The prosecutors responded by playing recordings where Lena described the operation in detail, bragged about her role in it, and threatened to destroy me if I ever tried to expose her. In the end, she pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges. The judge gave her 4 years, with possibility of early release for good behavior. I sat in the courtroom when she was sentenced. Not because I wanted to see her punished. I'd moved past anger somewhere around the 6th week, but because I needed closure. She looked at me once, just before they led her away. There was something in her eyes that might have been regret, or might have been calculation. After everything, I still couldn't tell the difference. Tyler took it harder than I expected. For weeks, he barely spoke. Went through the motions at school, ate dinner in silence, spent hours in his room with the door closed. I tried to reach him, took him fishing, played catch in the backyard, did all the father-son stuff I'd been too busy for during the years I was working doubles to support our family. Eventually, he started to come around. "Dad?" he asked one night, about 2 months after Lena's sentencing. "Did Mom do bad things because of us?" I turned off the TV, gave him my full attention. "No, buddy. Your mom made her own choices. None of this is your fault." "But she said she needed more money. I heard her talking on the phone once, saying we needed more money." Adults sometimes say things that don't make sense. It doesn't mean they're true. He was quiet for a moment. "Are you sad that Mom's gone?" "I'm sad about a lot of things, but I'm not sad that you and I still have each other." He nodded slowly. Then, for the first time in weeks, he leaned over and hugged me. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, Tyler. Always." 6 months after the arrests, I got a call from Agent Rivera. "We've recovered the stolen funds," she said. "Most of them, anyway. The court has ordered restitution. Money will go back into the workers' comp system to cover claims that were delayed or denied because of the fraud." "That's good news." "There's something else. Your role in this investigation has attracted some attention. The Department of Labor is looking to hire investigators who understand the workers' comp system from the inside. People with technical expertise who can spot fraudulent claims before they get processed." "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm suggesting you consider applying. Your welding background, your union connections, your experience with this case, you've got exactly the skill set they're looking for." I thought about it. The shipyard had been my life for 20 years. I knew every welding station, every safety protocol, every man on my crew. Walking away from that felt like abandoning part of myself. But Tyler needed stability, and I needed a fresh start. "Send me the application," I said. The Department of Labor interview was nothing like I expected. Instead of grilling me on regulations and procedures, they wanted to hear about the case. How I'd discovered the fraud, how I'd built evidence, how I'd used my technical knowledge to prove that certain injuries were physically impossible given the described scenarios. This claim describes a welder who suffered third-degree burns to his left arm from an arc flash incident, the interviewer said, sliding a document across the table. "What do you see?" I looked at the photos, the injury report, the witness statements. "The burn pattern is wrong," I said. "Arc flash creates a specific kind of thermal injury, rapid, uniform, usually affecting exposed skin. This photo shows burn marks that suggest prolonged contact with a heated surface. Different mechanism entirely. The claim was approved 6 months ago. Then someone didn't do their homework." The interviewer smiled. "That's exactly why we need people like you." 3 weeks later, I started my new job as a federal fraud investigator. The work was different from welding, but not as different as I'd expected. At the shipyard, I'd spent my days joining metal, creating connections that would hold under pressure, support weight, resist corrosion. In my new role, I spent my days finding breaks, places where the system had been compromised, connections that shouldn't exist, weak points that criminals had learned to exploit. Both jobs required the same fundamental skill: understanding how things were supposed to work, so you could spot when they weren't working right. Within a year, I'd helped build cases against 3 separate fraud operations. Nothing as large as the one Lena had been part of, but significant enough to make a difference. Each time I thought about the workers whose claims had been delayed, the families who'd struggled, the men and women who'd been injured doing honest work, only to have their benefits stolen by criminals who'd never picked up a tool in their lives. Tyler started calling me the worker defender. Apparently, he'd told his class about my job, and the nickname had stuck. I didn't correct him. The congressional testimony came as a surprise. 15 months after I'd started at the DOL, I got a call from a Senate staffer asking if I'd be willing to appear before a subcommittee investigating weaknesses in the workers' compensation system. They'd heard about the case I'd helped break. They wanted to hear my perspective. I said yes. The hearing was held in a wood-paneled room in Washington, D.C. I wore the only suit I owned, bought for my job interview, and tried not to look as nervous as I felt. Senator Dawkins, the subcommittee chair, asked me to describe how the fraud had operated, how it had been detected, and what changes I'd recommend to prevent similar schemes in the future. I spoke for 45 minutes. Described the techniques Victor and Lena had used. Explained how technical expertise, understanding the physics of workplace injuries, the realities of manual labor, could help identify fraudulent claims that looked legitimate on paper. Mr. Coleman, Senator Dawkins said when I finished, your testimony has been extremely valuable. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I thought about the question, about everything that had happened over the past 2 years. Workers' comp fraud isn't a victimless crime, I said finally. Every dollar stolen is a dollar that should have gone to someone who got hurt on the job. Someone's father. Someone's husband. Someone who just wanted to feed their family and ended up paying the price for doing honest work. I paused. I spent 20 years as a welder. I know what it's like to come home exhausted, wondering if today's the day something goes wrong. The system is supposed to protect people like me. Like my union brothers. Like everyone who builds things and fixes things and keeps this country running. And now I'm trying to make sure it does. I met Jennifer Walsh at a DOL conference 6 months after the hearing. She was a labor attorney who'd worked on some of the peripheral cases connected to Victor's network, helping legitimate claimants whose benefits had been delayed by the fraud. We got to talking over bad coffee and worse pastries, and by the end of the conference, I had her number in my phone. Our first date was a disaster. Tyler came down with the flu, and I had to cancel 2 hours before our dinner reservation. Jennifer said she understood, but I figured that was the end of it. She called me the next day. "How's your son?" "Better. The fever broke this morning." "Good. Want to try again this weekend?" We did. And again the week after that. And slowly, carefully, something started to build between us. Jennifer understood the work in a way nobody else in my life did. She'd spent her career fighting for workers' rights, pushing back against employers who tried to deny legitimate claims, advocating for people who'd been chewed up by a system that was supposed to protect them. "You're a good man, Ray Coleman," she told me one night, about 4 months into our relationship. "A lot of guys in your position would have walked away, protected themselves, let somebody else deal with the mess. It was my mess. It was your wife's mess. You could have looked the other way." I shook my head. Not when it was hurting people I knew, not when it was stealing from workers who actually needed help. She smiled. Like I said, a good man. Tyler's school project came due on a Tuesday in May. Career Day, his teacher had called it. Every student was supposed to present a poster about what one of their parents did for work. Most kids chose doctors, lawyers, firefighters, the kind of jobs that looked good on glossy poster board. Tyler chose me. He'd worked on it for 2 weeks, cutting out pictures, printing photos, writing descriptions in his careful 10-year-old handwriting. He wouldn't let me see it until the night before the presentation. "Close your eyes, Dad." I closed them. Heard him rustling paper, adjusting something on the easel he'd borrowed from his art teacher. "Okay, look." The poster was covered in images, welding torches, courtroom sketches, official Department of Labor logos. In the center, in big block letters, Tyler had written, "My dad, the worker defender." Below that, in smaller print, "My dad used to be a welder. Now he catches bad guys who steal from hurt workers. He says everyone deserves to be protected when they get injured on the job. I think that makes him a hero." I stared at the poster, at my son's face, eager and proud and waiting for my reaction. "What do you think, Dad?" I pulled him into a hug, held him tight. "I think you did good, buddy. Real good." Lena got released from federal prison on a Thursday morning, 18 months into her sentence. Good behavior, just like her lawyer had promised. I didn't see her, didn't want to. Tyler did, eventually. She'd earned supervised visitation rights, and I wasn't going to be the kind of father who poisoned his son against his mother. Whatever Lena had done, she was still Tyler's mom. He needed to figure out that relationship on his own terms. Their first meeting was awkward, according to Tyler. A lot of silence. A lot of things neither of them knew how to say. But they kept meeting. Once a month, then twice. Slowly rebuilding something I couldn't quite define. "She says she's sorry," Tyler told me one night, after returning from a visit. "For everything." "Do you believe her?" He thought about it for a long time. "I think she means it," he said finally. "But I also think sorry doesn't fix things." "No, it doesn't." "Is that okay? To still love her but also be mad at her?" "Yeah, buddy, that's okay. That's probably the most honest way to feel." He nodded. Seemed to accept that. I didn't pretend to understand forgiveness. Didn't know if I'd ever reach a point where I could look at Lena without remembering everything she'd done. The lies, the theft, the way she'd used our marriage as cover for her crimes. But Tyler needed to find his own path. And the best thing I could do as his father was let him walk it. The shipyard called on a Friday in August, 2 years after everything fell apart. "We're breaking ground on the new dry dock next week," my old foreman said. "Thought you might want to see it." I drove out on Saturday morning. The shipyard looked the same. Massive cranes silhouetted against gray sky. The smell of salt water and metal. Men in hard hats moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd spent their lives building things. Pete Kowalski found me by the waterfront. "Ray, what brings you back?" "Wanted to see the new construction." "Going to be a beauty. 300 meters long, big enough for aircraft carriers." He grinned. "Could use a good welder on the project if you're looking for work." "I've got work, but thanks." We stood in comfortable silence, watching the crews prep the construction site. Somewhere behind us, a welding torch sparked to life. The familiar crackle and hiss I'd heard every day for 20 years. "Heard you nailed some big fraud cases," Pete said eventually. Marcus Webb got his back surgery covered after all. Said something about recovered funds being reallocated. That's how it works. Money goes back where it belongs. Good. He clapped me on the shoulder. "What you did, Ray, it mattered. A lot of guys here didn't know how bad things had gotten until you exposed it. But we're better off now. Safer. That's all I wanted." "You miss it?" The welding? I thought about the question, about the weight of a torch in my hand, the satisfaction of a perfect bead, the knowledge that something you built would last. Sometimes, I admitted, but I found something else I'm good at. Fighting for the little guy. Something like that. Pete grinned. Well, if you ever get tired of catching bad guys, there's always a spot for you here. Union never forgets its own. I shook his hand. Walked back to my car through a shipyard that had been my whole world for 2 decades. Different job now, different life. But the work still mattered. That was enough. Jennifer moved in on a Sunday in October. We'd talked about it for months, weighing logistics, worrying about how Tyler would react. But when the day came, it felt less like a major life change and more like something that had been inevitable all along. Tyler helped carry boxes, made Jennifer laugh with his running commentary about which rooms were good and which ones had weird energy. By the end of the day, the 3 of us were sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by cardboard and packing tape, eating pizza straight from the box. So, Jennifer said, looking around at the chaos, this is what domestic bliss looks like. Glamorous, right? I love it. Tyler fell asleep on the couch around 9 p.m. Jennifer and I sat on the front porch, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. Are you happy, Ray? I considered the question. Thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the investigation, the long months of rebuilding. I'm getting there, I said honestly. Not every day, but more than before. Good. She leaned her head against my shoulder. That's all anyone can ask for. We sat there until the stars came out. Then I carried Tyler to bed, locked up the house, and went to sleep beside a woman who'd chosen to build something with me. Tomorrow there would be work, cases to review, fraudsters to catch, the endless, exhausting effort of protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. But tonight, I had this. That was more than enough. The end.